is voice working? Has anybody spoken yet?
I think you have. Yeah, alright, we might as well go ahead and get started. I like the bird thing. Is it new? Alright, well, let's see what's going on. We are still doing QA on Asset HTTP Viewer. I'm hopeful that'll be going out next week, but we will see. As usual, depends on the QA side of things. Let's see. Other than that, we have been continuing work on the animated objects. That's coming along nicely. I've got a setup now where it actually connects up correctly to the simulator, a correctly configured simulator, so that anybody who's running the appropriate viewer can see what's going on. So that's a nice step forward from where we were last time. It's still a ways away from an actual working project viewer, though. There's one issue is that if anybody who's not running a supported viewer visits the region, they will crash immediately because they see a message they don't recognize. It turns out we don't handle that very well. So we need to make things a little more robust that way. One interesting thing about this is the question of where the skeleton's supposed to be positioned. If you think about the way things work today with avatars, the skeleton kind of gets positioned first, right? We start out with the agent position that the simulator sends us, and then we position the bones starting from there and doing some jiggling based on hover height and trying to get the feet to touch the ground and various things. So that then whatever rigged objects you wear then get positioned relative to that skeleton, and the skeleton is kind of authoritative. Now it's kind of the opposite of that, right? You're starting out with an object that already has a defined location, and you're trying to figure out what the correct location for the bones is supposed to be. It's not entirely obvious what the right way to do that is. Right now I think I'm positioning the pelvis bone at the location of the object, which sometimes gives you a pretty good fit, and sometimes, when you start animating it, it takes this sort of jump in space where the skeleton isn't very well lined up with the object position. So it's not 100% obvious what the right thing to do is there. Should we just pick a convention and then kind of expect people to build their content accordingly, or should we be trying to do something smarter where we're trying to do kind of adaptive stuff based on the location of the skinned vertices and that sort of thing? Generally, I would tend to favor the simplest approach, but yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just thinking, of course there's already scripts in SL and stuff for animating prims not rigged. So maybe, I don't know how they do that because I'm not a scripter or anything, but maybe we could do it along those lines as to, kind of go with the flow of things. I don't know if that would work or not, but it's just a suggestion.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff I'm aware of, you have the ability to animate based on just setting the position and the rotation of the individual prims, which they already have their own idea about that, which is fine. The problem here is that once you start treating it as a skinned mesh, then its position basically gets overridden by the position of the bones that it's being skinned to. So the question is kind of how that's supposed to get lined up.
Does the skeleton... Oh, I just crashed. Oh, I was going to ask, does the skeleton not have an origin bone or a root bone?
It does have a root bone, and then the pelvis is connected to the root, and everything else is connected to the pelvis or descended from the pelvis. So we could position things relative to the root or relative to the pelvis. There's some special case handling, I think, for both of those.
I mean, it seems like the origin would always be, or that root bone would always be the ground, or at least you would animate it that way.
I think that's the way it normally works, that the root is kind of the ground position, and then the pelvis is, by default set a meter or so up from that. If someone says the pelvis is animated, then it'll be offset from the root pause. Yeah, that would be where you'd be animating relative to. Yeah, so I mean the issue isn't so much that the client-side mesh animation affects the position of the object from the sim's point of view. The sim doesn't really care that the animations are running. The question really is about where it should be displayed, in world. You need to position you have to put the skeleton. Basically, you have to create a skeleton to go with the object, right? And then you have to put the skeleton somewhere, and then the object's vertices are going to get kind of wrapped around wherever that skeleton is. So then the question is, what's the optimal position for the skeleton? Yeah, there's a question about collision. Yeah, collision is a kind of interesting question. Currently we don't really do collision detection on skinned objects. I think what we probably are going to wind up doing with that is to have collision detection based on using the collision volumes of the skeleton, but we haven't really started investigating that yet, so it's still kind of an open question.
Yeah, these questions are why I was thinking if we had an actual prim be the root, and so that you have an actual physical prim that has collision and can be, scripted or, have physics affect it, and could even be made invisible to be made into the, so things could bump into it to give it actual physics, mass. I was thinking that because wouldn't it be easier for like a prim to detect when it hits the ground, so that it's always in contact with the ground if you want it to be?
Yeah, I mean the prim kind of knows how to figure out when it's hitting the ground, relative to its own shape, but that doesn't necessarily line up with the shape that you get when you do the skinning, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like have a regular prim be the root, and then you have your pelvis bone be relative to that root. So, theoretically, you could put a prim at 128 by 128 on the grid, and you could then animate the rest of the skeleton to move anywhere in that grid if you just wanted to leave the prim in one spot. It wouldn't, or you could have the prim actually move, like such as, what is that, pathfinding? And then the skeleton would move along with it. So it'd give you like two different options.
Yeah, we might look at that. I mean, there is a prim now, right? A mesh object is also a prim, or it could be a link set that contains multiple prims. But whether we could tie that in with a physics object as well is something we should probably look into.
Right. I know all skinned objects are basically phantoms, and that's why I was thinking if we had an actual prim as a root, and you could resize that prim, the prim itself could be solid, but the skinned object, that is connected to the skeleton, is still a phantom. So you could kind of get 2 for 1. The actual prim can be made solid. People can bump into it. Anyway, it was just a thought.
Yeah, it's probably something we should look at. So far everything I've been doing is just related to trying to get the animations to play and get communicated successfully. And we haven't really looked at the kind of finer points of how the things like collision are going to work, but that'll be definitely on the list.
Awesome.
Yeah, one thing I'm hoping is that it's possible to take an existing mesh object and turn it into an animated object. That obviously opens up a lot more possibilities. Rather than forcing everything to be re-uploaded and in the process that would also shut out anything that people didn't still have the original source files for. So the way I'm handling it right now is you can just take an existing mesh object or a link set and basically an inventory item, and then flag it as an animatable object, and then it kind of gets the new behavior and the new messaging. Yeah. Well, yeah, it has to be rigged and weight painted. I mean, this would only apply to something that's already a skinned mesh object, but then just have the ability to turn it into an object that can be animated independently of an avatar.
Well, if you had the prim be the root, you could right mouse click on the prim and then select where, and then go into your inventory. So you're telling it to where whatever you're seeing in the inventory. So it's like you're telling the prim to wear this mesh. Then it could wear anything that's already previously uploaded that's rigged.
Yeah. So you're thinking that you've got a prim that's not a skinned object, but that's the root, and then the basically the existing link set becomes children of that.
Correct.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to hide the prim, you would simply make it 100% alpha. Or if you wanted to make that prim a phantom, you could. So it would give you the option of using the prim as something people could bump into, or you could make it even though it's invisible 100% alpha, or you could then use physics on it. You could use pathfinding on it because it's just a regular prim that the skeleton just rides along with it.
Yeah.
Wherever it goes, the skeleton goes.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you can already have a physics shape tied into to an existing skinned mesh object, but that would be something to look at. There was a question about having multiple skinned mesh, multiple rigged meshes. Yeah, that should work. We have some mesh models out there that are actually multiple pieces, right? You've got an upper body and a lower body or whatever that I think are actually separate objects that are in a link set. So the idea there would be that there's one skeleton for the whole link set, and then all of the all of the different components of the links that get animated by the same skeleton. Yeah, it seems like there should be a lot of possible ways to kind of mix and match different pieces and still have things work. We haven't done a ton of testing yet. I'm just working with a one-piece model, but we'll do more digging into that as things develop. Frame rate, I'm not seeing a huge impact so far. I've had some tests where there's a bunch of objects all going at the same time, and they're not if they're not very heavyweight objects, it doesn't matter too much. I'm expecting the impact to be similar to what you'd expect from a similarly rigged avatar, but again, it's at early stages. We don't really have definite numbers on that. Yeah, there's a question about editing size. Yeah, that's one thing that I think would be interesting is if we could, use the size of the object to sort of guide the size of the skeleton. So you could make your, you could make you know, uh, a riding bird and a miniature riding bird that follows you around or whatever. But that's also TBD what the details are going to be. Yeah, I mean, we could just use the bounding box. Yeah, the thing about it is that you've got, if you kind of look at the static object, you think about what the skinned mesh looks like when there's nothing to skin it to. There's not necessarily any connection to the scale there. Like we've had, these 100-meter tall. I think there was a case where something was like it was imported in the wrong coordinate system or something, and so it wound up being, 100 feet tall or something, and you really couldn't tell when it was attached, because it would get scaled down to fit the skeleton size. But if you just resed one on the ground, it would be this towering monstrosity. So, if you're trying to use the kind of unskinned behavior of the object or the unskinned dimensions of the object as a guide to something, then the people would have to actually kind of look at that when they're creating their meshes, and not just look at what it's going to be like when it's actually attached.
We could be crashing again.
Great. Yep.
know I'm going on about the prim.
Can't jump or move.
Oh, I was going to say, I know I'm talking about the prim root thing idea again, but you're talking about scaling. Would be interesting is if the scale of the skeleton was tied to the scale of the root prim. So that way, different animated objects could be scaled up larger or smaller. So say you had a herd of deer or something, or a herd of zombies or werewolves or something. You could scale them up bigger and smaller to make them different from each other. You know, that would be interesting if it was tied into, say, your basic root prim would be, 1 meter by 1 meter by 1 meter, and then if you scale that up to 2 meters by 2 meters by 2 meters, it would then make the skeleton twice as big.
Yep, he crashed us in. Crashes us. Yeah, I think we're crashing again. I think.
Yeah, unfortunately the problem right now isn't that the viewers are crashing, it's that the region is crashing, so even if your viewer stayed up, you'd still be losing your connection to the location.
That person in the corner is back again. That Gunemere 78.
Alright, well, let's attempt to meet. So, I don't know, we were somewhere talking about animated objects. Anybody remember exactly where?
And I can't move.
Uh,
So, yeah.
Oh, we're dead again.
Yep.
I can still hear everybody.
There's another 2-day-old arrived just before that happened.
And I'm gone.
Still here. Oh, I'm still here.
I'm not here, but my voice is. Should we move to another region?
I can turn, but I can't walk. I can't move. If we find
Yeah,
another region, that'd be awesome.
Fun. Voice will just stay connected for a bit, but we're dead.
Afterlife. Putting away. Floating away. Hello.
Uh,
I said I'm floating up here. I have no gravity.
we have scripts off, so you may see some behavior being a bit different.
Yeah, right. If you're wearing some attachments that rely on scripts, that's what's going on.
A problem up here?
Alright, well, let's try to carry on here. Let's see, so we've also got baking updates going on. That involves a bunch of kind of infrastructure work to get, which probably wouldn't be of a whole lot of interest to the group, but just for your information. We're doing a bunch of updates to get the baking service working on newer versions of Linux and things like that, and then with some updated related software. So anyway, that's coming along. The first step there is just getting the baking service updated to handle higher resolution images, and then once that's working, we'll need a corresponding viewer update, and then we can start looking at the actual feature work for supporting bakes on mesh, which is the ultimate point of the exercise. Texture Big will disable normal spec maps. No, nothing is changing about normal and spec maps. But the thing is that the baking service doesn't support normal and spec maps either. So basically, whatever you generate as a result of doing the baking is just going to generate the diffuse texture that gets applied to your object, and then the spec and normal maps are just going to get resolved the same way that they always have.
But
yeah, you can still have spec and normal maps just like you do today. It won't change at all.
good.
Yeah, right. You can't bake two or more normal maps together because the baking service doesn't know anything about normal maps. You can define a single normal map the same way you can currently. How it would be delivered to the mesh. So the idea there is that you would have a way of flagging a face on a mesh as saying, use a baked texture for this face. And then if you've got that flag, then it will use whatever the current baked texture for that avatar is. So if it gets updated, then it'll display a different texture. And if you and what'll get persisted is not the particular texture, but the fact that it's flagged that way. So when you relog or whatever, you'll get your current bake texture in that slot. Question about bakes on mesh. Yeah, right. The idea is that this would work. This uses the same textures that are getting generated now for traditional avatars. So you can have your skin plus a tattoo plus layers defined by shirts or jackets or whatever. It all gets kind of layered one on top of another to generate what's called the baked mesh, which is the kind of result of combining everything. So the idea with bakes on mesh is to be able to flag a mesh object as also wanting to use those textures. So you can have if you have a mesh object that has compatible texture coordinates to a system avatar, then you could potentially use the bake there too. Even if you didn't have a compatible coordinate, but you just define things your own way, you could potentially still use it too, although it would make the textures a little confusing when you're trying to look at them on wearables or whatever. So yeah, one point of this is to help with the onion avatar problem. It lets you combine textures rather than having to layer meshes on top of each other. Alpha channel. Well, the alpha channel would be included in the baking process, right? I guess actually the alphas are a separate wearable, aren't they? Stuff gets alphaed after the fact. Yeah, okay, yeah. I mean, the images have to have alpha channels, or you couldn't text them on top of each other, right? You'd always just see the top texture. Yeah, there have been some interesting proposals for doing this with more extensive kinds of things. Not just skin meshes that are being worn by avatars, but being able to request bakes of arbitrary textures and apply them to other things. I think there's some possibilities there, but that would be a little beyond the scope of what we're trying to do with the initial feature. The first goal is to tackle avatars, which is the lowest hanging fruit because we already have a baking system that knows about dealing with avatar textures, and probably also has the most benefit because we have a long-standing issue with these layered avatars that give you very inefficient content. Is the big texture as a feature not necessarily dependent on animated meshes? I mean, it depends on having skin meshes. It's not related to the animated mesh project, the thing that I was talking about earlier. We can, it's going to be kind of released on its own schedule and isn't tied to this work on being able to have independently animated objects. Yeah, the persistence is an interesting question. You can have when bakes are generated by the baking service, they're kind of temporary. They get updated and I don't know if they actually ever get thrown away, but at least they're obsoleted when the avatar contents change. Whereas here, you if you have something that you want to be a persistent item, it's kind of a different logic than what we have now. Yeah, and I'm sure that the speculators and normal maps would also be nice. The reason that we're not looking at it initially is because the baking service doesn't have them. It was not only does the baking service not know how to deal with those kinds of textures, but the wearables themselves, the clothing items that are being combined into these layers, also don't know anything about speculars and normal maps. The whole system was defined before we had those.
Nice.
Still add those manually to an object that was receiving the big textures, I'm assuming.
Sorry, can I say it again?
Okay. So say you have a mesh avatar, a custom mesh avatar, and you're receiving the baked textures from your real avatar, that you could still apply those other speculative spec maps and normal maps to that custom avatar. It would just have to be applied manually.
Yeah, right. You can certainly still continue to use spec maps and normal maps. What you wouldn't have automatically is the ability to combine spec maps and normal maps from from multiple components, so that your shiny armor goes over your bump map nightgown or whatever, and it all gets resolved.
Correct. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Hey, nothing new on supplemental animations. That's it's in the queue, but haven't done anything with it yet. Oh, I see that Anchor Linden has joined us. I should introduce him. He's joined us just a few weeks ago and is working on Second Life development now, and he's working on the texture bake stuff, the bakes on mesh, which initially means working on the updates to the baking service. So hopefully he'll be able to join us for some of these meetings, and just wanted you to have a chance to say hi to him.
Hi guys, how you doing?
Are you sure he's safe here?
Apparently those of us without bears are in big trouble. Sorry, which boxes are we talking about populating all at once instead of one at a time? Is this for editing materials? Or for uploading meshes? I was thinking we actually had some kind of naming convention, but it's been a while since I looked at any of that. Would certainly encourage people to file a JIRA if they have a request on that kind of thing. It's hard to hash out the details in a, just a discussion, but if we have something written down, we can talk about it. And I'd actually encourage people to upload more meshes, particularly making sure that they have actual LODs for all of their LODs. Set LOD at 100. We should probably set all of the coarser LODs to actually be more detailed, just to be on the safe side. Encouraging people to do a better job with mesh LODs and physics. Yeah, there's, that's one of the things that we're going to be looking at in the context of updating the avatar rendering cost calculations, but anything else we can do to encourage kind of good citizenship and good models would be worth thinking about. You know what? It's easy to it's at least relatively easy to add checking where we look at the number of triangles defined for different LEDs or that sort of thing. Of course it's much harder to actually assess the quality. If people have a target number of triangles, they can still fill it with garbage, however many or few it is. I think basically as long as there's an easy way to make sure that people think the lower LEDs are never going to be seen, they don't have much incentive to try to make them good. And of course, rendering a million poly model in a 2 by 2 pixel square in the corner of your screen is just insane.
Oh. Oh.
Yeah, that's definitely not a great solution.
in my LOD series, I specifically tell people not to do that.
Oh,
You say
before we
s-
go. Oh, sorry.
There was a comment about scoring them lower. I'm curious what the context is there. Are we talking about the score in terms of the avatar rendering cost, or this is like some additional thing that gets added to the added in the marketplace automatically or something like that? Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the LOD adjustments. I mean, really, it should be up to the system to figure out which LOD is correct to display based on how big it is on the screen. For someone to just have an aesthetic preference for trying to do something that's physically impossible, basically cramming 500 pounds of pixels into a 1 pound bag, just it doesn't make any sense. Alright, well, it looks like we're at time, so I guess we will see everybody next week.
Oh, Fear, before we go, I do have an announcement about MayaStar.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. I finally have gotten the update done for MayaStar. So it will be up and available in just the next hour or two. So it's finally done. It doesn't have the .anim, or it still hasn't finished that yet. And the other thing that I wanted to say is I finally also do have my Maya voice control program up for sale, and I'll put the link to my website for those who are interested in it to check it out. There's a 5,000 voice command version that's fairly expensive, and then there's a much lower 125 command version, which is much cheaper. But anyway, I'll put a link to that in the chat group. So thanks, Fear.
Yeah, the voice control thing also sounds really cool.
Yeah, it was a lot of work. Cool to do something in a viewer, so you can control different things in your viewer by using your voice, like saying inventory, and then the inventory pops up, or fly or something, and you fly.
And somebody walks by and says, "Delete all items."
Yeah, you definitely have to have a safe word.
It's probably worth noting that Avastar is on RC10. So that just came out the other day. So if you're using Avastar, you probably want to download that.
You seeing any major differences from the previous versions?
Just a lot of bug fixes. Buttons actually do what they're supposed to. So.
Yeah, so I agree that the question about LODs, a lot of it is kind of education. We could probably be doing more to publicize exactly what people are uploading when they're uploading it, and to publicize it more in the marketplace as well. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting possibilities to explore, but we'll have to figure out what the best thing to do is.
Just a note on that too, that when the customers kind of understand what they're buying and what's good and what's not, or what's efficient and what's not, you will see them make a move. I mentioned before that some bloggers were talking about how many polygons some of these mesh bodies were. So when you get some of these big bloggers talking about this stuff, it can go pretty far.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to understand the the consequences. It's easy to think that well, more polygons means better quality rather than more polygons just means more slow. But all right. Well, anyway, I should head out. We can continue the discussion next week. Well,
I'm gonna turn scripts back on now, so yeah, good luck.
Thanks, Fear.
Stand back.
It's kind of hard to get to stop the shopping addicts. I mean, come on. And who wants to, really? Come on. Just buy mine, right? But it would be nice. One thing, Linden Lab has not done is there's no score on the marketplace. Every clothing item should have a rendering score. You shouldn't be able to put an item on there without a score.
I personally would like to see sort of a combination score, land impact, rendering, and also a score that people can vote on. And those who have better scores get higher up in the search results. So if you have a great combination of low impact but awesome looking stuff that people think is great looking, that puts them up in the search results to help it, encourage people to make, use less polygons but make as good looking thing as they possibly could.
Well, in some ways, it's almost ridiculous that we at least don't have to put a polygon count, or something. It should almost be automatic, too. The system should, read your mesh. This is how many polygons it is.
Right, yeah, because you have to have the actual item, uploaded to the marketplace, so the marketplace could see exactly what the land impact or the poly count or rendering costs are.
Oh gosh, it's. I think today I see textures as more of a problem than even mesh, because when I go places, people invite me places, or some client wants me to look at something. I go there and everything's gray because it takes so long for all these textures to load.
Doesn't the lab have a system in place where, say you uploaded a mesh with 10 by 24 by 10 by 24 texture on it, but then do they have a system that resamples that texture down so that when you get down to like the low and lowest LEDs, they automatically sample the texture down to say 256 or 128 by 128? Okay, good. Oh, okay. Thanks, Elizabeth. I didn't know that. Sarah?